What's up guys, this is Dozy here and I am bringing you a Frost Mage PvE guide as of patch 5.0.5. That is the start of Mr. Pandaria. Firstly, in this guide I am going to go through the talents and glyphs you should have. Secondly, the rotation and how to max your DPS. Thirdly, the stats that you should be getting and stat priority. And last of all, the macros that would make your Frost Mage easier to play. Before I get into this guide though, you should note that this guide only applies to patch 5.0.5 and Frost Mages are subject to change in the future. Let's start this guide off with the talent and glyph section. Now there are 6 tiers of talents, and in tier 1 there is 3 talents you can either pick. Number 1 would be Presence of Mind, which grants you an instant cast spell every 90 seconds. Number 2 is Scorch, which is an ability which you can use whilst on the move. And number 3 is Ice Flows, which grants you 2 spell casts whilst on the move, uninterrupting your whole rotation. Now this tier is entirely encounter dependent. If you are not moving at all within the boss fight, you might as well go Presence of Mind due to the damage bonus that you will be getting from not casting. If there is lots of movement, you might as well go Scorch so you can still do damage whilst moving, and if there is only a little bit of movement to one position and to another, then you might as well go Icy Flows due to you being able to do your normal rotation. The tier 2 talent is all about survivability. There's 3 talents yet again, with the first one being Temporal Shield, which is a 10-second effect where the damage you take in the first 4 seconds will be healed back over the last 6 seconds. Blazing Speed, which is a castable ability which grants you movement speed for 1.5 seconds, however this can only be used after you take damage or kill an enemy. And Ice Barrier, which absorbs damage and prevents spellcasting from being pushed back. Now Icy Barrier will result in a slight DPS increase due to the pushback and AoE damage that many bosses have at the moment. It won't apply to you when the shield is up. Temporal Shield should be used when your healers are struggling, and only on bosses that your healers should be struggling on. Blazing Speed shouldn't be actually needed at all because mages have Blink. Tier 3 is all about crowd control and matters more in PvP rather than PvE. This will not increase your DPS. This tier will not increase your DPS whatsoever, so it doesn't really matter what you pick. However, I will still go through the talents nevertheless. There is Ring of Frost, which casts a 10-yard ring that lasts for 10 seconds. Anyone that walks into this ring will get frozen for 5 seconds. Ice Ward, which is placed on a friendly target. All enemies within 10 yards of that target will get frozen for 5 seconds when the target is meleeed. And Frost Jaw, which silences and freezes the target for 8 seconds. Tier 4 is all about survivability. There is Greater Invisibility, which improves your invisibility spell, making you instantly invisible and taking 90% less damage whilst invisible and 3 seconds after coming out of the invisible. Cauterize, which causes an attack that would otherwise kill you, brings you to half health, but burning for 40% of your maximum health over the next 6 seconds. And Cold Snap, which finishes any cooldown on any frost spell and restores 30% of your maximum health. Greater Invisibility will be rarely used and extremely situational on only certain fights. In general, Cauterize is the best because it prevents you from dying altogether. Cold Snap can be useful if you want to ice block 2 times in a row without the 5-minute cooldown. Tier 5 talents are talents that become part of your rotation. First, there is Nether Tempest, which deals a damage over time, which you can put on as many targets as you want. It also does half the damage to any random target within 10 yards. Secondly, there is Living Bomb, which is another dot which explodes after the last tick and deals damage to all enemies around it within 10 yards. However, this can only be applied to 3 enemies. There's also the last one, which is Frost Bomb. It deals damage when it expires to the target and half of that damage to all enemies around it. For single target damage, they are relatively the same. However, for AoE damage, Frost Bomb does seem to be the best and putting out more damage than the rest. So I see no reason why not to go for Frost Bomb all of the time. Tier 6 talents are all about mana management and the spell damage buff you gain from these talents. The first talent is Invocation, which reduces the cooldown of Evocation to 10 seconds, however you passively regen 50% less mana over time. After completing the full Evocation, you gain a buff which grants you 25% increased spell damage for 40 seconds. Secondly, Rune of Power, which summons a circle on the ground which causes you, if you stand on it, to regenerate 100% more mana and deal 15% more spell damage. It replaces Evocation and the rune disappears after 1 minute. Lastly, there is Incanter's Ward, which places an absorption shield on you for 8 seconds. After this effect disappears, either to damage or expiry, it grants you up to 30% increased spell damage for 15 seconds and restores up to 18% mana. This effect depends on how much damage was absorbed. The less damage, the less the effect. Now, any of these talents are viable and it just depends on what you prefer. However, Frost Mages should lean towards Invocation due to stacking haste and therefore lowers the cast time of Evocation. This seems to get better the more haste you have. Rune of Power will still perform close to Evocation, but it is definitely worse when you have more haste. Incanter's Ward is great when you can use it. However, on many of the fights you may have some downtime with the spell buff you get from it. Here is an overview of my talents which I use whilst raiding. You can clearly see that I've spec'd into Presence of Mind due to the damage increase, Ice Barrier due to the knockback decrease, Ring of Frost cause why not, Cauterize for myself not dying, Frostbolt because of the AoE damage as well as doing the single target damage roughly the same, and Invocation due to stacking haste. So now the talent part is done, we'll be moving on to the glyph part of the guide. Now there are 2 specific glyphs that you should be using for being a Frost Mage. Your first glyph should be Glyph of Icy Veins. It changes your Icy Veins spell to, instead of increasing 20% spell haste, it does 40% damage on each spell. However, the spell hits 3 times. To get maximum benefit of Icy Veins, it should be used with Heroism or Bloodlust or Time Warp, so that you can get 20% spell haste and you're hitting 20% more with your spells. The second major glyph you should be using is the Glyph of Fire Blast, as your Fire Blast ability can force Frostbomb to explode. This helps on boss fights when you have to push through a phase quickly, as it maximizes the damage at that particular time and gives you an instant Frostfire Bolt as well. The third major glyph is up to you, however I recommend either using Glyph of Ice Lance, due to Ice Lance be able to hit a second target for 40% of the damage, or Glyph of Water Elemental, so your Water Elemental is always by your side and never out of range of the boss. For the minor glyphs, it doesn't really matter which one you pick, because none of them increase damage whatsoever. These are the glyphs that I currently use whilst raiding. Now on to the next part of the guide, which is rotation. For single target damage, the rotation that you should be using is as follows. First, either use Evocation, put Ring of Power down or Incanter's Ward up to get your spell power buff up, and you should keep this up at all times. Next, put Nether Tempest or Living Bomb or Frost Bomb up. Use it on cooldown or when it expires. Use Frozen Orb on cooldown. Cast Frostbolt until 3 stacks are up on the enemy target. Use Presence of Mind if talented. Cast Freeze from Water Elemental to get Fingers of Frost procs. Then cast Ice Lance when you have the Fingers of Frost procs. Cast Frostfire Bolt as soon as the Brain Freeze procs. And cast Frostbolt as a filler in between all of this. Multiple target rotation is exactly the same as single target, but using Flame Strike on cooldown instead. For the armor that you should be using, the only armor that will benefit you is Frost Armor due to the haste buff it gives you. Now the final part of this guide will be the stats you should be getting and the stat priority. First stat you should be getting is Intellect. That is the main priority you should have. After that, it will be the hit to 15%, which is the hit cap for any boss. Remember that expertise now counts as spell hit for any spellcaster. After that, the secondary stats you should be getting is haste all the way. Just stack haste as much as you can. If you already have haste on a piece of gear and hit cap, then crit and mastery have relatively the same values until you hit 28% crit. After you hit 28% crit, then just go mastery. Thank you for watching this guide. If you liked it, then subscribe, as there will be more videos like this in the future, and I'll see you all next time.